How do I figure out what's next in my career? How do I align my work with what truly matters to me? And the biggest question of all, can I really design a career that I love? Hey, my name is Jen Smith, and I believe career success doesn't have to come at the expense of living a radiantly happy and healthy lifestyle. As a former HR leader and recruiter turned career coach, I've seen how traditional paths can leave people burned out or boxed in. And I know there's a better way, one that invites you to let go of outdated rules and outside expectations, one that evolves and supports meaningful growth over time. Whether you're feeling stuck, craving more clarity, or ready to expand within your current role and beyond, this show is for you. So grab your coffee or your kombucha, pull up a seat, and get ready to explore practical, modern strategies for building a meaningful, heart-based career. Because you deserve a long, radiantly happy, and healthy career. This is the Flourish Careers Podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Flourish Careers Podcast. I'm Jen Smith, your host, and today we are talking about everyday magic and how to start noticing it. In last week's episode, Sarah Young, Jenny Blake, and I talked about creating from the heart and the signs and synchronicities that show up when you're actually paying attention. We talked about the whispers you can't quite explain, but at the same time, you can't quite ignore either. And after we finished recording, I kept thinking about something we touched on, and it was this idea of co-creating with the universe. Because when I look back at the process of creating the in-season planner, it was filled with those moments. So many, actually, that I've come to believe it wasn't created just by me. It was created with something bigger. And I know that sounds a little out there, but the truth is, life is kind of wild. And when you start noticing this kind of magic, it makes everything feel a little lighter, a little more supported, and more meaningful. So today I want to talk about it. And I'm not talking about it because I think my creative process is special. It's because I love noticing everyday magic, and I want for you to find and notice yours too. So before I get into the stories, I want to give you a frame for what I mean when I say everyday magic. I'm talking about synchronicities, those moments where two completely unrelated things line up in a way that feels deeply meaningful. For example, a song that comes on exactly at the right moment. A book that somehow finds its way to you and says exactly what you need to hear. Running into someone you were just thinking about 5 minutes earlier. These little breadcrumbs are tiny moments that feel like confirmation you're on the right path, that you're supported, and that you're not doing this alone. Something that both Sarah and Jenny said that I keep coming back to is that noticing it is a muscle. It takes practice, and the more you use it, the stronger it gets. Now, I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole, and I found that there's actually a word for this, and it's called pronoia. Pronoia is the opposite of paranoia. Instead of believing the world is out to get you, pronoia is the belief the world is actually working in your favor. Life is one big, generous conspiracy unfolding for you. And I just love that. Thinking that things are working out for you. This does not mean that everything is easy, but synchronicities have a way of reminding you you're guided, you're aligned, something bigger has your back, and when you start to trust that, life feels a lot less like a grind and a lot more like something you're participating in and something that feels alive. So let's get into it. If you haven't heard, this past year, I did something that I've never done before and created a physical product, the in-season planner that you can actually hold in your hands. And that process, learning as I went, making millions of decisions without a roadmap, trusting what I couldn't see yet, pushed me into completely new territory. And I have to say, I have so much more respect for product-based businesses now. The process was exciting and terrifying at the same time. There were so many moments where I genuinely didn't know if I was doing the right thing or making the right calls, or if I had just completely lost my mind. And if you've ever created something new, a business, if you've been through a career change or worked on a project that really matters to you, you know that feeling. It's a mix of, I think this is right, and what if I'm wrong? And these things kind of just live in the same space. But what surprised me most was how often I felt like I wasn't doing it alone. Not just in the human sense, but in a bigger, harder to explain way, because the signs kept showing up. Moments of timing so precise, they stopped me in my tracks. Little winks that seemed to keep saying the same thing. Keep going. It started with a number. For the past 2 years, I've been seeing 555 everywhere. On clocks, on receipts, on license plates, on timestamps. I have it screenshotted on my phone. I'm not exaggerating, probably 1,000 times. At first, I laughed it off. Okay, universe, I see you. But it kept happening and happening and happening. And so finally, I looked it up. 555 is the number of change, of movement, transformation. As a career coach who guides people through seasons of transformation every single day, that landed a little different than I expected. It became a sign and a reminder to keep going. Trust the shift. You are moving in the right direction. And it wasn't just the 555. So this story gives me chills and tears at the same time. When I was redesigning the quotes inside the in-season planner, I needed to make sure everything was aligned, both inspirationally and from a copyright standpoint. What I thought would be a quick swap turned into a complete reimagining of every single quote inside the planner. It was a lot. But somewhere in that process, I found myself pulled, like really pulled, toward the words of Louisa May Alcott. She's the author of Little Women. Now, I read Little Women, but it was years and years ago, and I couldn't explain why I was drawn to her words, but they kept resonating with me. And then there I was sitting with my dad, going through the fonts and the spacing and the layouts together. So if you don't know, my dad is a graphic designer, and him and I designed the interior of the planner, literally page by page together, which was just so lovely. So there we are, going through the fonts and the spacing and the layouts of all the quotes once again. And he casually, off the cuff, says to me, "You know, my mom loved Little Women." His mom, my paternal grandmother, which felt so special on its own. So I sat there for a second, and then, of course, I opened Instagram, as one does when they're sitting, and there, with zero reason, from an account I never followed and have never seen before, was a reel. And it was black and white. It had this old-timey feel to it. And it was all about the significance of your paternal grandmother and the gifts she passes down through lineage. The message said, your paternal grandmother holds clues about what you're here to create and how your soul expresses its gifts. I got chills and then tears because there I was, creating something from the heart. It was meaningful and fun and with my dad. And unknowingly, I had woven in a story that my grandmother loved, a story that was part of her. It literally felt like she was right there with me saying, "I'm here, keep going." I don't know how else to explain that, and I'm not sure I need to. Some things you just feel in your bones. Then there were the bees and the bears. For the past 2 years, the entire time I've been working on the planner, bees kept showing up. Live bees flying into my house, all over my office, and so many more bees than usual in our backyard. And then I started seeing them everywhere else too. So they were on greeting cards, on mugs, on book covers, in shop windows. In fact, when Sarah and I were at Business Besties brunch and walking through Brooklyn, I walked into a bookstore and there, right on the counter, the second I walked in was a little book that said, OMG bees. They were everywhere. And I kept thinking, what is this about? What are all these bees trying to tell me? And then someone offered an answer and they said, bees are drawn to beauty, to flowers, to things that bloom. And one of the core principles behind the in-season planner, something I felt from day one, is that beautiful tools inspire beautiful work. Beauty invites us back to ourselves. And I wanted to create something so beautiful that you'd want to return to it every single day. Something that felt like a retreat rather than a to-do list. And then there were the bees showing up the whole time, pointing at the exact thing I already knew but needed to keep hearing. And then the more I sat with it, the more the metaphor deepened, because bees don't just visit a flower once, they come back again and again. Little by little, visit by visit. That's how pollination works. That's how growth happens. Not in one dramatic leap, but in quiet, consistent returning. And that's exactly what I want the in-season planner to be for you. Something you come back to, not out of obligation, but because it's beautiful and it's yours. And every time you do, you're pollinating your own growth. Small little pieces over time, adding up to something you couldn't even have imagined at the start. So the bees knew the whole time. Of course they did. Nature always knows before we do. And then there were the bears. Bear was the name of my first dog, and this was a soul dog connection, the kind of dog who leaves a permanent impression on your heart. Bear has been in heaven for years, so when I saw the name on the conference room door, I stopped in my tracks. Let me explain this. When I first went to meet the local printing team who was going to print the planner, literally bring it to life, they walked me into a conference room, and the conference room was called Bear. So, of course, I asked about the name, and the representative, Jessica, told me the room was named after their grandfather, who was nicknamed Bear. We got to talking, and it turns out she loves these kind of moments too, these divine winks, and it felt like this instant soulful connection. But the bears didn't stop there. In the final kind of anxiety-filled stage of production, when everything feels real and terrifying, and I was really wondering if I had lost my mind, I was doing a guided visualization and a bear appeared. This has never happened before. That same day, later in the day, I was on a Zoom call with a colleague, and she suddenly glanced out her window and said, "Look, a bear." It turned out to be a very large dog, but still, the timing was really interesting. And then right after that, I walked downstairs and picked up the mail, and I found a postcard from Sarah, who was on the podcast last week and who has been with me since the very beginning of this whole planner journey. And on the front of the card, an adorable brown bear sitting among the trees of the Blue Ridge Mountains. One after another, I felt Bear, my bear, right there alongside me, cheering me on from wherever he is now. Then, when I looked up the symbolism of bears, I nearly fell over. Bears are a symbol of going inward. So you think about bears and how they hibernate and then they awaken. So bears symbolize going inward, and the awakening of the potential that already lives inside you, as well as deep listening before you share. And that's exactly what the planner process has been for me. And one more detail I can't leave out, the address of the print company, the one with the bare conference room where the planner was born, their street address is 777, which in numerology is a sign of a spiritual awakening, alignment, and divine guidance, a sign you're on the right path. I mean, come on, you can't make this up. Now, I have to tell you one more, and if you were on with us last week, you heard a version of this, but I want to tell it again because in the context of everything I just shared, it just fits perfectly. So on the day that I named the business Flourish Careers, I bought the domain flourish.careers and filed the LLC and then went to run some errands. I stopped into Barnes & Noble, and while I was checking out, I glanced down at a small display near the register, and there was a little tray. It was green and pink floral, so pretty, and the word flourish written across the front of it in white block letters. Of course, obviously, I immediately bought it, and that tray still sits right here in front of me on my desk every single day. And it just reminds me that the signs are there. You just have to look for them. When you set a clear intention, when you commit, when you take aligned action, the universe responds and confirmation shows up. It's not the magic that's happening to you. It's the magic that meets you right when you need it most. So now let's get a little more practical, and I want to share just some ways that you might use to start noticing your own magical synchronicities. Because I promise you, they're already there. You just have to create the conditions to see them. Last week, Jenny and Sarah shared a suggestion that was really simple. Ask for a sign. You can be specific. You can even be demanding. Ask for 3 signs if one doesn't feel like enough. And then go about your day with open eyes. Your subconscious will attune to what you're looking for. The synchronicities of everyday magic require only one thing from you: enough presence to notice that they exist. That's it. Slow down. Create a little space in your day, and when you do, magic always slips in to fill that space. The more you listen, the more you notice. The more you notice, the more you trust. And here's a practice that's been really helpful for me through the years, and it's one that I've woven directly into the in-season planner, which is a way to bring this all to life for you. At the end of each week, take a moment to reflect and notice everything that brought you joy. It doesn't have to be a cosmic synchronicity. It could be a perfect cup of coffee, a text from a friend you were just thinking about. Could be a really good parking spot that you were super excited to get, or a song that made you feel something. When you start noticing and naming these moments, and when you write them down, you are literally rewiring your brain. You're shifting out of the dread and the grind and looking for the good. And once you start looking for the good, you start finding it everywhere. And here's another thing. You can take it a step further, because noticing it is one thing, but scheduling it is another. And there's a section in the in-season planner called Declare a Daily Delight. This is where you take what you've been noticing and you start intentionally building more of it into your schedule. So take a look at what lit you up this week and ask, how do I make sure that happens again? Put it on your calendar, protect it, treat joy like the appointment it deserves to be. Not as a toxic positivity exercise, not about pretending hard things aren't hard, but as a way of staying anchored to the evidence that life is full of beauty and then actively choosing more of it. Notice what brings you joy, write it down, and schedule it. Your everyday magic is waiting. The thing about all of these moments, the 555s, the bees, the bears, my grandmother's favorite author, the flourish tray, none of them made the process easy. There were hard days, tons of doubt, moments I wanted to quit, many of them, but they made me feel less alone. And I think that might be what magic really is. It's not the absence of difficulty, but it's the presence that something keeps walking alongside you. Last week, Sarah talked about her biggest opportunities show up when she steps away and sits in the sunshine. Jenny mentioned how losing 80% of her revenue became the pivot that led her exactly where she needed to go. And I think that these stories and what they have in common is that the universe was present in every single one of them. It's doing its work, it's leaving the breadcrumbs, and that we're not alone. So whatever this is for you right now, a career change, a big pivot, the thing that you're building, the season you're navigating, just know that you are held. The signs are there. The breadcrumbs are being left. You just have to slow down enough to notice them. So this week, I want to invite you to do one thing. Maybe pick one of these small practices. Notice a daily delight. Pause at the end of the day and ask, where did I feel supported today? Or where did something arrive just at the right time? Start there and see what opens up. My guess is that you'll start to notice the magic. So that's a wrap for today, my friends. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your synchronicities. So find me on Instagram at flourish.careers or send me an email or head over to LinkedIn and let me know. And if you know someone who needs a little reminder that the universe has their back right now, go ahead and share this episode with them. That might be the synchronicity they've been waiting for. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, the notes from today's episode will be on the blog at flourish.careers/blog. We'll talk to you next time.